The Millicans have transformed OC through their love of this place and their generous support. They've also transformed our state. They're active in many initiatives to make Oklahoma an even better place. And if you follow the news, very recently you might have seen that Don and actress Jennifer Garner talked to a congressional committee in Washington, D.C. about the importance of early childhood education for all kids, but especially for those facing poverty and other life challenges. As I'm watching Don and Jennifer Garner on TV, I am texting him saying, invite her to Oklahoma Christian University, Don. Although many of us have devoted our lives to Christian higher education, I don't know anyone who has a stronger belief in the importance and in the impact of a Christian college education. You will be blessed. We will all be blessed with what he shares with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Don Millican.
Wow. I'm glad you mentioned my new BFF, Jennifer Garner, John. She hasn't accepted my Facebook request. I don't know what the deal is. Well, thank you for this honor. John knows that I struggle quite a bit with honorary degrees because I don't want to cheapen the accomplishments of those who have worked so hard to actually earn the degree. But I accept this honor from this community as a gift from this community that I have come to greatly admire and to love. So thank you. I appreciate so much the kind cards and notes and comments I've received over the past few weeks. They mean so much to me. It's been truly a privilege and an honor to serve you all these past 15 years. Certainly, we have endured some challenging times, but endured we have. But there will always be challenging times in the world of Christian higher education. It is never going to be easy. It is never going to be easy. So we should not be drawn to the question of when is it going to get better, but rather to the question of, is it worth it? Is it worth it to invest in this work? Is it worth it for those who are investing their lives and labor here? Is it worth it for parents and students who pay their tuition here? Is it worth it to alumni and friends who give their money here? Each person has to decide the answer to that question for themselves. I can only give you my answer, and my answer is a resounding yes. Yes, it is worth it. I'm not an alum of OC. I graduated from a state school, and you may wonder why I've spent so much time and my resources at this school. Why have I sent my children and now my grandchildren here? Well, there are two key reasons. First, I see the college age years of 18 to 22, or for some of you, 23 or 24, as a vector point. Now, those of you who may remember your geometry courses may remember that a vector is a line that starts at a given point and extends for a distance. And that the distance between two vectors that start at a common point but aim in a slightly different direction, the distance between those two grows as they extend into the distance. In my opinion, the college years are that vector point at which the trajectory of life is set. And setting a trajectory with a faith-infused education, I believe, gives a young person the best chance of a successful and faith-filled life. But the second reason I believe it is important for Christian higher education to exist, and it is worth it, is I believe the world needs educated Christians to bring their education, their learning, and their critical thinking skills to bear on the problems of this world. Now, don't get me wrong. I do not mean that a person has to have a college degree to have an impact on the world of the kingdom. God save us from that arrogance. But I do believe that Christians with higher education have a very significant role to play. And what do I mean that Christians should bring their skills to bear on the problems of this world. As Christians, isn't going to heaven the only thing that matters? God would beg to differ with that conclusion. God spoke through his servant Isaiah in the 58th chapter of his book to tell religious people, tell us that all of our religious activity is worthless in his eyes if we mistreat our workers, if we do not break the chains of injustice, if we do not break the yoke of oppression, if we do not feed the hungry and clothe those who need clothing, if we do not care for the poor who have been cast out and are homeless, in today's world, the refugee. And as Proverbs 31:8 expands, if we do not speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, our religion is worthless. The evangelical Christian community has been quite vigilant and diligent in protecting the rights and well-being of the unborn, and as well we should. But these passages tell us that we must be equally vigilant in protecting the rights and well-being of those already born. The words of Isaiah will not let us turn a blind eye to the fact that more than half the people on this face of this earth live in poverty, many suffering from diseases that are easily preventable or cured. They will not let us be callous towards the millions who are displaced by war and poverty, or the millions more who are trapped in human trafficking, or to the children in our own communities who are under the oppression of intergenerational poverty, children who did not choose the circumstances of his or her birth. Nor will these passages let us be silent when others suffer injustice because their basic rights are violated. We are only able to turn a blind eye to these fellow children of God when we insulate ourselves and isolate ourselves from them so that they can be the them who are out of sight and out of mind. These are enormous problems. These are insurmountable problems. These are problems we will not solve. But thankfully, Isaiah does not tell us we have to solve these problems, rather that we must spend ourselves in the effort. I don't believe it's an accident that God calls this fasting. In fasting, we intentionally weaken ourselves so that we are more acutely aware of our reliance on God. And likewise, when we choose to attack unsolvable problems, when we choose to attempt to climb unscalable mountains, we become more acutely aware of our own powerlessness and our total reliance on God. But in spending ourselves on these efforts, God promises that our light will shine in the darkness. Because by the power of God, we will be a beacon of hope to all we encounter. Though we will not fully solve these problems, we do believe that by the power of God, one person can indeed make a difference. I call that Christian idealism. An idealism we should hold to until our last breath. Yes, as Christians having higher education, we must bring our skills and our Christian worldview to bear on the problems of this world. A worldview that sees all people as children of God, regardless of race or which national border they may happen to reside behind. A Christian worldview that understands that wealth and privilege is a gift from God to be used on behalf of the betterment of those who struggle in life. A worldview that sees humanity as Jesus saw humanity, with compassion, a humanity harassed as sheep without a shepherd. So what does this look like? What does it look like to apply our skills and Christian worldview to the problems of this world? Well, it looks like the faculty and staff at this university, who at limited compensation pour their lives into imparting that Christian worldview, the ripple effect of their work spreading out in space and time as their graduates spread out all over the world. It looks like the host of preachers and ministers and missionaries who are trained at this university, who labor in the field of souls to take the gospel of hope to the world. It looks like the hundreds of teachers who have graduated from here who work tirelessly to give children a foundation for life, particularly those who work in low-income schools. It looks like OC graduates who give 2 years of their life for Teach for America to teach underprivileged kids. It looks like the many Christian nurses who graduate from here, who touch lives every day with compassion and hope. Or the OC graduates who have gone on to become doctors, who are dedicated to healing both body and soul. It looks like OC graduates who've committed themselves to foster care of children and to adoption of children needing a home. It looks like OC graduates Adam and Ben Langford, who with great courage, they were a part of the Kibo Group, an organization in Uganda that now has Africans helping Africans solve Africa's problems, an effort in which Adam lost his life. It looks like OC graduate David Bowden, a poet who spreads the message of hope in various media, but who has recently developed an education series that is exposing the young people of England and Central Europe to the possibility that God exists and that they have a soul. Young people raised in a largely post-Christian and godless Europe. And that series is being adopted in a number of educational systems. It looks like OC graduate Tyler Parrott, who works with OK Policy, an organization dedicated to the well-being of the working poor. It looks like a group of OC engineering students who developed a low-cost system that allows ALS patients to be able to speak and say, "I love you," to their loved ones long after they've lost the ability to physically speak. It looks like OC graduate Amber Foster, who has dedicated her life to working with homeless teenagers on the streets of Tegucigalpa, Honduras. It looks like our own Gary Jones, who takes students on a spring break trip through the South every year, teaching a new generation about the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and who reminds us that the struggle is not yet over. It looks like OC Products Larry and Kathy Bowles, who work with refugees in Greece. And it looks like OC graduates who are now business leaders, who use their resources to support worthy causes. Not everyone can be a missionary. Not everyone can work in an international relief organization. Not everyone will have a job that works directly with the poor and the sick. So what are the average Christian college graduates supposed to do to change the world? How can they be a part of what Isaiah is calling us to be a part of? Well, there are two ways. First, if you can't personally do directly much of what Isaiah calls you to do, you can become involved in an organization that does. Not only can you financially support that organization, or perhaps guide it as a board member, but you can volunteer and participate through that means in their advocacy and relief efforts. As John mentioned, because of my involvement on the board of an early childhood education organization, unexpectedly, I was called to testify before Congressional Appropriations on behalf of Head Start funding, along with my BFF, Jennifer Garner, which I will mention as many times as possible. Second, don't underestimate the impact of small acts of faith. Let me tell you a story. Over 60 years ago today, my in-laws were marginally involved members of a church in Shreveport, Louisiana. Another couple from their church, who were a few years older, lived in the apartment above them. That older, slightly older couple mentored my in-laws. And one day, the husband of that couple asked my father-in-law a question. He said and asked, "When are you going to get serious about your faith?" From that question, my in-laws did become serious about their faith. My in-laws moved to the Dallas area, and they led the neighbors on both sides of them to Christ. One of those neighbors took in a troubled young teenage girl, who had a troubled young teenage boyfriend, and that neighbor led those teenagers to Christ. Later, those teenagers got married, and the husband decided he wanted to go to preacher training school, and he became a pulpit minister for an inner city church in Denver for many years. And oh, by the way, both of their kids graduated from Oklahoma Christian. That Denver church had a prison ministry, and that husband, now preacher, led a certain prisoner to Christ. That prisoner, now ex-prisoner, completed his Bible degree at Oklahoma Christian and has been a missionary in China for over 20 years, leading hundreds to Christ. And one of those he led to Christ in China is going to be a computer science professor at Oklahoma Christian in the fall. Let that story sink in. One word of encouragement spoken over 60 years ago changed the world. My mother-in-law is here today. Wave, Betty. She will forgive me maybe later. And to add more, because my wife Donna and I met at church, had her parents not become more serious about their faith, likely Donna and I would have never met. And because Donna, frankly, was the spiritual strength in the early years of our marriage and I wasn't, had we not married, there's a good chance I'm not standing before you today. Never underestimate the power of small acts. With a Christian worldview and the belief that by the power of God, you can make a difference in the world, get involved in people's lives, and look for that opportunity to speak a word of encouragement. A small spark, and God will take it from there. Isaiah finishes the 58th chapter by telling us that if we do these things, if we practice his kind of religion, his kind of fasting, our light will shine forth in the darkness, and our night will be like the noonday. One thing that I have concluded in life, after all the education, after all the Bible study, it comes down to one thing that matters, one thing we are called to do, one thing. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine all the time. Let it shine, oh yeah. Stay with me on this one. Out in the darkness, I'm gonna let it shine, oh, out in the darkness. I'm gonna let it shine out in the darkness. I'm gonna let it shine all the time, let it shine, oh yeah. Let your light shine in the darkness. May God richly bless you. Thank you.